Okay, so very important. The first question was asking which graph represents a direct variation. What is a direct variation? This is a review. What is a direct variation? Where does the graph start if it's a direct relationship? Yes. Pardon? Yes, it starts at 0, 0. It starts at the origin. And it's linear, which means it's a straight line. So what's the only possible answer? Yes? Glenn? A. Okay? It cannot be B because B does not start at the origin. B has a y-intercept that's not 0. Why can't it be, sorry, it can't be C. Why can't it be B? Where does B start? So what's the y-intercept for B? Is it 0? No, it's a number other than 0, therefore it cannot be direct. D starts at 0, 0, but why is this not a direct variation? Yes? It's not a straight line. Good. Okay, so that was pretty straightforward. Okay, number 2. Which of the following equations is non-linear? We talked about this. A linear relation can only have an exponent of what? What is the exponent? Y equals mx plus b. Do any of these have an exponent that's not 1? Do any of these have an exponent that says like to the power of 2 or to the power of 3?
No.
In a linear relation, the highest degree, meaning the exponent, can only be a 1. Otherwise, it's not linear. So what is the exponent for A? Do you see an exponent there?
No.
So you imagine there's a 1. So this is linear. What about B?
Yes.
B says y equals 3 to the power of x. Because they put a variable there, that means x can be anything. So x can be 2, x can be 3. So is that linear? This cannot be linear. Is C linear? Yes. Okay, so the answer was B. Y equals 3 to the power of x. And if they're putting a variable, that means that we can replace that variable with any number. If I replace that variable with the number 2, it's no longer linear because the exponent is not a 1. Okay? Okay, so opposite of direct. Partial means what? What would the graph look like for partial? Direct starts at 0, 0. Partial means what? Where would partial start on a graph? Can start anywhere but 0. So let's say it starts here, anywhere but 0. That means that the y-intercept is anything but 0. So let's look at these equations. A says y equals negative 2x plus 0. There's nothing there. So what's the y-intercept of this equation? In the equation y equals mx plus b, the number in front of x is the slope. Remember we talked about this? And the number by itself is the y-intercept. So in this equation, we have y equals negative 2x plus nothing. There's nothing there. What's the slope of that line? For A, what's the slope of the line? Negative 2 is the slope. And what's the y-intercept? 0. So if the y-intercept is 0, that means that A would start at the origin. Can that be a partial variation? No. So this is not a partial variation. Let's look at B. B says y equals x squared. If it has a to the power of 2, is it possible for it to be linear? So this cannot be a partial variation because that will not be linear. Okay? What about C? What's the slope for C for this question? What's the slope, Vance? Negative 4 is the slope. So the slope equals negative 4. And what's the y-intercept? Negative 2. So we discussed earlier that a partial variation can have a y-intercept of anything but 0. This has a y-intercept of negative 2. So is that possible for it to be partial? It has a y-intercept that's not 0. So this is the one that's partial. So C. Okay, so the question is asking between which 2 points can you draw a line with a negative slope? What does a negative line look like? A line with a negative slope goes which way? Down and to the right. This will always be a negative slope. What does a positive slope look like? Up and to the right, or yeah, that's fine. You can say it both ways. So if I draw a line from A to B, let's say, is that a positive slope or a negative slope? Positive slope. If I draw a line from B to C, is that a positive slope or a negative slope? Remember we talked about this. If a line is horizontal, copy this down. Horizontal lines have a slope that is equal to 0. Why? It doesn't rise. Good. Slope is equal to rise over run. Okay. Does BC have a rise? Does it rise at all? No. So it's 0. Does it have a run? Rise goes up, right? So this line doesn't go up at all, but does it go across? Does it run? Yes. How many spaces? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the rise is 0, the run is 5. Slope is equal to rise over run, but what's 0 divided by 5? 0. So slope of a horizontal line will always be 0. The only other option now is drawing a line from A to C. Does that have a negative slope? Yes. So what was the correct answer? Do we remember? I'm going to draw a line here. I'm going to call this I'm going to call this DE. Okay? What is the slope of DE? Let's calculate it. Does this have a rise from D to E? 1, 2, 3, 4. Does it have a run? Does it go across? We talked about this last week. 4 divided by 0. Can you take a number and divide it by 0? What is it called? Undefined. Okay? This pen's not working. Sorry. So any line that is vertical, the slope is undefined. What is going on with this? Okay, so a vertical line has an undefined slope.